Can someone tell me what verse is up there? Chapter 11?
Text 27, 28.
27, 28. Hare Krishna. Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
So if you don't mind, I will read from my phone because it's like a blur for me. I can't see anything on there without glasses. So apologies for Mixfaku. Perhaps he forgot he was scheduled today. But he's not here. Hare Krishna, Hare Sri Caitanya Adi-lila, chapter 11, 27, 28, is that what we said?
Yes.
It's going to be about some great personality. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. There we go. And 27 is on the board? Nityanande?
Yeah.
Okay. Nityanande Samapila Jati Kula Panti.
Nityanande Samapila Jati Kula Panti.
Sri Caitanya Nityanande Kari Pranapati.
Sri Caitanya Nityanande Kari Pranapati.
Nityanande Samapila Jati Kula Panti.
Nityanande Samapila Jati Kula Panti.
Sri Caitanya Nityanande Kari Pranapati.
Sri Caitanya Nityanande Kari Pranapati.
Nityanande Samapila Jati Kula Panti.
Nityanande Samapila Jati Kula Panti.
Sri Caitanya Nityanande Kari Pranapati.
Sri Caitanya Nityanande Kari Pranapati.
Others, please.
Nityananda Samapila Jati Kula Panti.
Nityananda Samapila Jati.
Sri Caitanya Nityananda Kari Pranapati.
Nityananda Samapila Jati Kula Panti.
Nityananda Samapila Jati Kula Panti.
Sri Chaitanya Nityananda Kari Pranapati.
Sri Caitanya Nityananda Kari Pranapati.
Nityananda Samapila Jati Kula Panti.
Nityananda Samapila Jati Kula Panti.
Sri Chaitanya Nityananda Kari Pranapati.
Sri Caitanya Nityananda Kari Pranapati.
Nityananda Samapila Jati Kula Panti.
Nityananda Samapila Jati Kula Panti.
Sri Chaitanya Nityananda Kari Pranapati.
Sri Caitanya Nityananda Kari Pranapati.
Okay. 27. Nityanande.
Nityananda.
To Lord Nityananda. Samapila.
Samapila.
He offered. Jati.
Jati.
Caste distinction.
Caste distinction.
Kula.
Kula.
Family.
Family.
Panti.
Panti.
Fellowship.
Fellowship.
Sri Chaitanya.
Sri Caitanya.
Lord Chaitanya.
Chaitanya.
Nityanande.
Nityananda.
In Lord Nityananda.
Lord Nityananda.
Kari.
Kari.
Making. Pranapati.
Pranapati.
The Lords of his life.
The Lords of his life.
Translation, and there's no purport, so I'll read the next verse after this. So this is verse 27 translation. Making Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda the Lords of his life, Gauri Das Pandit sacrificed everything for the service of Lord Nityananda, even the fellowship of his own family. I'll read the next verse, verse 28. Nityananda Prabhu Priya Pandita Purandara Premanava Madhya Pire Vyachana Mandara. The 13th important devotee of Sri Nityananda Prabhu was Pandit Purandara, who moved in the ocean of love of Godhead just like the Mandara hill. Repeatedly, the 13th important devotee.
The 13th important devotee.
of Sri Nityananda Prabhu was Pandit Purandara, who moved in the ocean of love of Godhead, just like the Mandara hill. Purport. Pandit Purandara met Sri Nityananda Prabhu at Kadadaha. When Nityananda Prabhu visited this village, he danced very uncommonly, and his dancing captivated Purandara Pandit. The Pandit was in the top of a tree. Upon seeing the dancing of Nityananda, he jumped down on the ground and proclaimed himself to be Angada, one of the devotees in the camp of Hanuman during the pastimes of Lord Ramachandra. Interesting. So, Om Ganati Milandasya Ganam Ganam Salakaya Sakshus Un Militam Jena Tasmahe Shri Gurave Namaha. So my apologies for being here, but unfortunately the scheduled speaker didn't make it today for whatever reason. So we are reading from Sri Caitanya Charitamrita. How many people in this room have read the whole of Sri Caitanya Charitamrita? Nobody? Anybody out there? Okay, interesting. Alright, so I won't get too far into it. So Sri Caitanya Charitamrita is the often described, or we hear commonly, as a postgraduate study. After reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, first we study the Bhagavad Gita, and then we progress on to the Bhagavatam and the Sri Caitanya Charitamrita. It's one of the most elevated spiritual literatures practically in the whole universe. It's so packed up. This Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has been described here, Nityananda Prabhu, there are Krishna and Balaram on the altar. They're sitting over there too. So Krishna and Balaram, the original Supreme Personality of Godhead. Srila Prabhupada would describe him that way, as Balaram as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Is that what she's got there? Is that Nityananda? Who you got there? Krishna? Somebody. They appear in all these various pastimes. In this particular pastime of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is quite extraordinary, because when Krishna comes, either Krishna or Lord Chaitanya, and Lord Chaitanya is not different than Krishna, all these incarnations come with him. And then we see a variety of devotees also come. In this case, Purandara is exhibiting the symptoms of a devotee of Lord Ramachandra. Is also, many devotees come. So the Sri Caitanya Charitamrita is very, very authoritative, compiled, written down by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami in his very final years of his life. He was very unwell at the time, and he had direct access to direct associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and also to the diary of Sarup Damodar that was memorized by Raghunath Das Pandit. So he had quite intimate association. Also the Goswamis that were there at the time, who were also associates. Sri Rupa Goswami was instructed directly by Lord Chaitanya. Srila Sanatana was instructed for 2 months continuously by Sri, so they had, and also lived in Puri for periods of time. So we're very fortunate we have devotees that personally witness the activities of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and also pen them down. And Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami was able to compile this. He also quoted something like 55 different scriptures in here. So it's not just from the top of his head. He quotes a lot of authorities, and it's primarily the Srimad Bhagavatam, Nectar Devotion, and Bhagavad Gita. And he compiles the most intimate, highest philosophy. He gives access to the people of this age, which generally are considered very fallen, unfortunate, misdirected, unlucky, downtrodden, short-lived. There's not a lot going, even though we're very proud with our technology and all the advances we're making in destroying the planet, and our spaceships and our rockets and our drugs and our fast foods and fast phones and fast internets, but the people are miserable, misguided, they haven't got a clue what the purpose of life is, and hence they're suffering. Because a pure living entity, a soul, which is made of spiritual matter, cannot mix with a dense or subtle material energy. they're not compatible. Like we often use the example, oil and water don't mix. So it doesn't matter how much material activity, information, sense gratification, association, that comes from a material source. When it comes in contact with the living entity, there's no rasa there, no pleasure, no taste, because it's nothing to do with us. We're not of this world. So the Sri Caitanya Caritamrita doesn't just offer answers to this, to our problems, but it gives us an insight into the topmost spiritual information, which is performed in the topmost spiritual planet by the most intimate devotees of the Supreme Lord. And it's offered to us through the mercy of Srila Prabhupada. Very comprehensive information. It's not just that yes, in the Bhagavad Gita we understand we're a soul, we're not matter, and the Bhagavad Gita encourages us and concludes with that we have to perform bhakti. And the Bhagavatam further demonstrates that bhakti performed by various devotees at various times. And ultimately you get to the topmost bhakti, which is a bhakti which is found in the topmost plane of the spiritual world, Goloka Vrindavan, and it's special, it's different than the other type of devotional service. It's in the Vaikuntha planets, it's all very, very, a lot of awe and reverence, and it's based on knowledge. They understand that Narayan is the Supreme Personality of God, it is God. And naturally, if you're in the presence of God, you are very respectful, isn't it? Very respectful. And it's very difficult to get close to such a person who's such a great person, that there's always a distance that remains. Even though there's a loving respect, there's service is there, but that's as far as it goes. But in this higher realm, and Prabhupada used to describe Vrindavan, Goloka Vrindavan, or Vrindavan on this earth as Krishna's home, the home of the Supreme Person, and Vaikuntha, Narayan, is Krishna or God in his office. He's like formally acting as God. Krishna is not God in the sense he delegates the job or the activities of God, which is creation and controlling and organising the affairs of the spiritual world and the material world. That's designated out. Krishna's too busy enjoying with his loving devotees. It's like this famous example that we often hear. Prabhupada quoted that Prime Minister in the early 19th century, I can't remember his name now. Remember that? What was his name? Anyway, it's just he had a name. He was an English Prime Minister, and he had Gladstone, yes. So this is a true story. He had a very important meeting with an important person. It might have been an ambassador or who knows. And that person came on time, and the secretary said, you have to wait, he's busy. And he waited and waited, and it's like you're thinking, fair enough, he's the Prime Minister, but I'm also important. And then the secretary stepped out for a moment, so he got off his waiting chair and he had a little sneak through the cracks of the Prime Minister's door. And what did he see in there? What do you think he saw? Yes. Yeah, the Prime Minister had his grandchild visiting, and he looked in there, and the Prime Minister was on his fours, playing a horsey, and his grandson was on his back. Go horsey, go horsey. So this is like for someone that normally the people that deal with the Prime Minister, there's a lot of respect, or reference, distance, formalities, isn't it? But now in this situation, that grandson, he doesn't see his grandfather as the Prime Minister. He sees him as his grandfather, and he's playing horsey with him. And the grandfather is getting much more pleasure from playing horsey with his grandson than running the whole country. Certainly less anxiety. So this is a gross example we use, but Krishna, the Supreme Person, takes more pleasure relating to his devotee on the personal, loving level without that barrier of awe and reverence. So in Goloka Vrindavan, which is what's described that in Sri Ada's book, there's loving relationships that are there between these intimate, loving devotees of Krishna. and they have friendship, there's parenthood there, there's servitorship, there's so many, and they interact. And can you imagine a genuine relationship which is based on the soul, on the spirit, right? Because in the material world, our relationships are based on our material conditioning, our bodies, our mind that we've developed through our many lifetimes, our influences from others and the media and our surroundings, our environment. We have these, which are ultimately false relationships because they're based on coverings that are on the soul. They're not based on spirit to spirit. So they're not fulfilling and they're not lasting. And many people end up fighting and breaking up and going separate ways. They can't maintain because it's maintained on a false platform, not a real platform. The opposite in the spiritual world, the relationships are 100% pure, original persons. They're not covered by any false energy of any kind. So it's an actual, and not only that, they're eternal. And eternal is hard to understand because eternal means no beginning and no end. It means forever. So you can't imagine this, but imagine having a loving relationship, an honest, pure relationship forever with somebody, how deep and wonderful it would be, because it would be ever growing, continuously forever. It says that Srimati Radharani, every day she makes herself more beautiful for Krishna. Every day and forever. How do you do that? So these are concepts that we can't conceive of in this world. So this information is delivered through philosophy and through practices that we have to follow, and what will happen in time, and it can be faster for some, for others, depending on your previous lives, especially depending on your association, depending on your sincerity, your practice, your application, and most importantly, the good association you take, and then the memory and the reawakening of your natural spiritual self will come back more and more to the point where you'll be able to have that pure relationship with Krishna again, naturally. For those of you who've read Caitanya, any Caitanya fans here? I love that book. There you can follow the story of Gopkumara, who's a devotee in this world, and you follow his progress all the way through for a long, long time till he actually returns to the spiritual world. And in terms of our material time, that's zillions of years, and lifetimes it could be as well. It's so long it seems forever. But when that reunion is there, it's just like, where were you? We were playing, you disappeared. The time is completely different in the spiritual world. It's described that the life of Lord Brahma, who is the original person, creator of this universe, agent of the Supreme Being. Krishna doesn't personally bother creating, he has people do that for him. When you're an important person and very influential and powerful, you don't have to do everything yourself. Krishna's too busy tending his cows and playing with his boyfriends and clowning around with the girls and doing all sorts of naughty things behind Mother Yasoda's back, which you just can't quite pick up on it. So he's too busy doing that. So all these other things go on. So I've completely lost my track then. What was I saying?
So you spoke about Vaikuntha and Gopkumara.
Oh yeah. So when Gopkumara finally returns to the world, which is beautifully described in the Caitanya, it's such a strong, deep emotion of love, because these relationships are eternal. It's not something that we have to establish and create. And that's explained actually in this book, Nityasiddha Krishna Prem Sakha Kabunoi, that pure love for Krishna, that pure spiritual consciousness that's eternally established in our hearts. It's not something to be gained from another place. Not that we have to pretend to be something else or force ourselves. No, it's a natural reawakening, cleansing system that you naturally. And when you're naturally awake, no one's going to tell you that you're awake. When you wake somebody up, they're awake. Especially if you pour a bucket of water over their heads. So this process of Krishna consciousness is very powerful like that, because we've been bound up for so long, tendency we want to roll back into the laps of Maya, of the material energy, because we've associated for so long with these material bodies and material minds and material sense gratification that we tend to think like that, and even that we get taken on this very powerful process, Krishna consciousness, that tendency is still there. So we have to understand that's just a bit of conditioning which will wear out more and more as long as we keep trying to wake up. And the waking up system is very simple. We chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. It's done through hearing. In the 12th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, it's explained that within the region of the heart, there's a sky. It's described as a sky, a spiritual sky, like as a, excuse me. Gauranga, excuse me. Sometimes we speak about the soul residing in the heart. Krishna, the super soul, the expansion of God that follows the living entity situated in the heart, but it's not sitting in a bunch of red flesh and blood, some gross, material muscle. It's explained as a transcendental spiritual region within the heart, and in that region, transcendental means it's not of this world. Us, in our pure form, resides there. Krishna resides there also. And the Bhagavatam explains that when there's transcendental sound, which means sounds not of this world, sounds of spiritual sound vibration, which we're reciting today, and the Maha Mantra is a spiritual sound, pure sound vibration. When those sound vibrations are heard, they actually enter into that region. Other sounds don't affect that region. They enter that region, and Krishna hears that. And it's described in the Bhagavatam that it practically gives you a nudge. Did you hear that? So it's like a friend, Did you hear that? Helping you to reawaken like that, because we're in a very deep material sleep. So that's why the process of hearing and chanting continuously, as much as possible, is the best method of devotional service. It's prescribed at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. Even in your pure state. Shrimati Radharani is described in the Caitanya as the topmost Sankirtan devotee. She's always absorbed in hearing and chanting, remembering Krishna. It's described in there when she's brooming the courtyard, she's singing songs about Krishna. Mother Yasoda is always making up songs about Krishna to remember him. So this hearing and remembering and chanting about Krishna goes on continuously, never stops. But it gets sweeter and sweeter, and obviously more relishable, to the point where nothing else of this world attracts you or has any sort of taste. There's no comparison anymore, and you become more and more absorbed in Krishna consciousness. So this is the process we're following, and I've had to diverse from the verse here because I didn't have a chance to prepare or to study on it. But here in this section of the 11th chapter, all the followers, all the Nityanandas, just as I was saying that Krishna has all his friends in the spiritual world, associates. So when Krishna descends in various forms, he is coming directly as himself, Lord Caitanya, but is disguised as a devotee. He's Bhakta avatar. But he's Krishna himself. Krishna Van Tuishna Krishna. Sangopagrasa Pashanam. He's not blackish, but he's Krishna. And he comes with all his associates, consider his astras, his weapons, and so on, and performs this Sankirtan Yagna. And he simply comes here to distribute. And if you read in the beginning of this book, it gives internal and external reasons why the Lord Caitanya comes, but the external reasons he wants to. There's the Yuga Dharma. Yuga Dharma means the process that's best prescribed for this age, that's more effective for this age, because there's other processes, the deity worship and yagna and meditation that in previous times they would do, but it's not effective in this age because we don't have the ability to sit down for long periods of time and meditate or perform very elaborate sacrifices. The mantras have to be chanted perfectly, and you have so much opulence, and we just don't have the ability to the memory and the qualified Brahmins to do these things effectively in this age to the point where we can bring perfection to the living entity. So the Yuga Dharma is different for every age, And the Yuga Dharma for this age is this chanting of Hare Krishna Maha Mantra prescribed in the revealed scriptures. That's a process. So Lord Chaitanya comes for that purpose. That's one of his external purposes. He also comes because his great devotee, Sri Advaita Acharya, has been calling out to him. Advaita Acharya 500 years ago saw the state of the consciousness and the spiritual lacking in people in that period of time, to the point where he thought to himself, the only way that things can change and people can be elevated in spiritual consciousness is if Krishna comes directly himself. It was so dire, so serious. So he prayed every day and called out, offering Tulsi and Ganga to the Lord and calling out. So it's explained that Lord Chaitanya came for that cry. He came for the Yuga Dharma, and he also, it's explained earlier on, he was thinking to himself. Krishna was thinking to himself after he came 5,000 years ago, it's been quite some time since I've given that special love, special type of bhakti that's experienced by the residents of Vrindavan. He's thinking like that. So I'll do that also. So this is a special Kali Yuga, even there's many Kali Yugas. In one day Brahma does 1,000 cycles of Yugas, and he lives 100 years. So how many cycles is that, Sean?
100 cycles.
Yes. In one day Brahma. I don't know, that's what I'm asking you.
I don't know. 1,000 cycles.
It's 1,000 in one day, right? And then 30 in a month. That's 30,000 times 12 is how many? 360,000 times 100. You just add a couple extra noughts, you'll get the answer. So that's how many times Kali Yuga comes around. But only in one day of Brahma, which is this particular Kali Yuga, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu comes and he delivers this special, very rare form of bhakti, which is only performed by the residents of Vrindavan, which is very intimate. Like I was saying at the beginning, it's not less formalities. They don't see God as a supreme person. They see him as his friend, lover, parent, whatever it may be. It's a son, and the dealings are on that level. They're not in dealings of like I said earlier, like the Prime Minister formal dealings, more like the Prime Minister and his grandson at home with his family and friends, completely different relationships. So the Supreme Person, God, has that side of him that's very rarely understood and known and taught, to the point when it only happens once in the day practically of Brahma, which is, and Lord Brahma lives for, he lives for a long time, 311 trillion years or something, for a long time. So Srila Prabhupada has given us this Sri Chaitanya Caritamrita. In this chapter we're hearing about all these associates. So these are all these personalities that I've been mentioning that associate, they're always with Krishna. So if Krishna comes as Lord Chaitanya, they come also. And we're hearing here this Pandit Purandara has come also. But he's in the mood of, it says here, I've got to open the glasses. As you remember Angada, who's actually a devotee of Lord Ramachandra. So all those, Lakshman, that's also Balaram, comes as Lakshman. They comes as Balaram himself. He's as Lord Nityananda, who's on our far left. So Krishna manifests continuously his various pastimes, and all his entourage come. Krishna is not a loner. God is not a person that's on his own. He's never on his own. So that's why if you see a picture of Krishna on his own, it's generally not considered so bona fide, because Krishna's always with his devotees. He's always got some cows with him, some gopis, some cowboys. He's always, and it's like, he's a supreme being. He has unlimited loving relationships with unlimited amount of devotees. And I've said this before, it seems like our relationship, if you consider how many living entities, souls, are just on this property in New Govardhana. Do you want to estimate anybody how many spirit souls? There's a spirit soul in every blade of grass, every tree, every insect, bird, animal. Any guess? How many souls do you reckon would be on this farm? 1,000 acres. You can't figure it out? I can't either. It's a lot. So and then what to think of Moolumbar, what to think of the Gold Coast, Australia, this planet, the whole universe, all the other universes, unlimited universes, and then the whole spiritual world, which is considered 3/4 of the whole creation. So you can't use figures like zillions and billions and trillions because they would cut it. So you wonder how one person, Supreme Being, can have a relationship with all of those personalities. I guess that's why he's a Supreme Being. He's able to have complete, full, deep, loving relationship with every single living entity in the whole material and spiritual world. And Srila Jiva Goswami goes on and says that every single living entity, that's every single one of us and the rest of the living entities, he says they have a unique relationship with Krishna, with God, with the Supreme Being. And he says Krishna misses that particular relationship because nobody else has that relationship. That's extraordinary, isn't it? So I like to repeat this point because this gives us impetus in our spiritual quest, because we've actually got some unique to offer to God. We have a particular loving sentiment towards Him that's unique to us, and Krishna misses and loves to have. Krishna enjoys unlimitedly, and that's why He's expanded unlimitedly. There's so many living entities. He's able to do that. He's a supreme enjoyer. And our business is to give Him enjoyment. And as soon as we stop trying to enjoy separately, as we do in this world through trying to give sense gratification to this blunt material body and satisfy our subtle mind, as soon as we direct that directly to Krishna, we become fully satisfied because we're back in our natural state. As long as we remain separate from God, from Krishna, and trying to enjoy separately, and then we become frustrated, and ultimately we get kicked out anyway at death. We get thrown out of these bodies. The bodies just get burnt or buried, and that's it. And then we, according to our activities and how we conducted ourselves under the laws of karma, then we're rewarded another body, and the whole thing goes on again. So it's not very, so the soul becomes very frustrated. That's why it's explained, Bhavanam Janmanamante Ganamam Prapadati. Krishna says in the Gita that after many, many lifetimes of frustration and inquiry and cultivating knowledge, we start to realize actually there's a bit more to life, and we start to understand Krishna is there, and we're his eternal servant, and then we reawaken slowly our dormant spiritual consciousness through the cultivation of spiritual knowledge and spiritual practices and good association, and then we reawaken. And then what happens at the time of death? You don't take another body again. You transplanted it, possibly is what I'm looking for, to your original position in the spiritual realm, and you continue your relationship, which actually always existed. It's not like you have to start from scratch. When God Kumara returns to the spiritual world, it's just back in the swing of things. It's quite extraordinary. And all these millions and millions of lifetimes we've had, it's just like a little bad dream. Even though when we're here it seems like it's so important. But it's not that important. Because like I say, the real importance is the spirit being inside of us, which is our true self. Everything else is, all these external things are temporary, and we shouldn't just dedicate our lives just to the temporary. We should use our high intelligence and put a serious amount of time into cultivating a spiritual consciousness. So these books, like Sri Caitanya, are there for that purpose, to guide us along, to give us very rich, deep spiritual information. It's enlivening and enthuses us to keep on going, keep on trying. Like that. So all these devotees that have been introduced in this chapter are extraordinary devotees. I'm going to read the next one because it's one of my favourite ones. Because if you remember this next devotee's name, there's a little benediction that goes with it. So I won't read the purport because it'll be read next week, but I'll read you the Parameshvara Das. This is verse 29. Parameshvara Das. Everyone remember that name? Parameshvara? Repeat it. Parameshvara. Okay, stick that in the memory bank. Parameshvara is said to be the fifth Gopal of Krishna Lila, completely surrendered to the lotus feet of Nityananda. Anyone who remembers his name, Parameshvara Das, will get great love of Krishna very easily. Okay? So take that. We've got to take whatever we can, whatever helps. So there's a lot of benedictions in this book. It's basically saying, if you remember this devotee's name. So they're so important and so dear to the Lord or his devotees. We've been reading every weekend various devotees of Lord Nityananda. And Krishna means Sri Krishna, and Lord Chaitanya means Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita, Gadadhara, Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhaktavenda, Gaura Bhaktavenda. So Krishna in his fullness means all these aspects and personalities. Right? It's very important to understand. This is explained in earlier chapters. The Panchatattva, we chant that mantra every day. Sri Krishna Chaitanya. So these are different energies and aspects of Lord. Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Nityananda is his direct expansion, Advaita is his incarnation, Gadara is his internal energy, and Srivas is marginal energy, the jivas like us. And Gaura Bhaktavenda means all his followers. That's God in his fullness. He's not just a loner, like I said earlier. He comes in. So these devotees are so important. He is saying in this verse, I just read just by remembering the name of that one devotee. There's so much benefit. And why is that? Because they're very dear to the Lord. You love me, you love my dog. It's like Krishna is so attached to his devotees. He resides in their hearts. You know, I think he was asked, is it the Ambarish? What canto is that? 8th? Or, anyway, it's described there. I don't reside, if I could, in the spiritual world. I reside in the heart of my devotees. That's where Krishna lives. Wherever his loving service is performed, his name's a chant, that's where he is. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Sri Chaitanya Caritamrita, which is we're so happy to have, Krishna himself directly comes as a devotee and teaches the process. You can't get a better teacher. He teaches how to love himself. So you could say that's a big alter ego there, you know. But he is. He's the greatest. He's the biggest. So and not only that, he wants to experience that himself, because he sees how much his devotees love serving and loving him, how much pleasure they get. That he wants to experience that. So he comes a devotee himself. So practically, and all these followers, everybody wants to be his devotee. Even himself wants to be devotee of himself. So, and why in the material world we all want to be the opposite. We want to be the supreme enjoyers. We want to take his place. We want to be God, and it doesn't make sense if God himself wants to be a servant. You know? So we suffer in our illusion simply because we're forgetting our real selves. So this process of Krishna consciousness will help us to reawaken. And Srila Prabhupada, by his divine kindness, has created so much facility for us. He says, gallons of blood to print these books and make devotees and travel all over the world at an elderly age, in great sickness. He was very unwell. And he travelled the globe 14 times, translated something like 60, 70 volumes of books, and wrote and lectured. I mean, when you try and put together what Srila Prabhupada did, it's not possible to do in one lifetime. It doesn't make sense. And it's taken us now, Srila Prabhupada left in 1977, these devotees are still writing volumes of books about his life. And not only just his life, the last 10 years, that's where we were exposed to Prabhupada over the last 10 years of his life when he came in 1965 to New York. But just that from 66, because nothing much seemingly happened the first year in terms of members, but in 66 the movement started to manifest. In that 10-year period, there's devotees are still writing volumes of memoirs. And there's Hari Sauri Prabhu is writing volumes on 18 months that he spent with him. Just you know, his kept diaries. So we have so much information, and so Srila Prabhupada's devotional service is so extensive, it's hard to comprehend. He was voted as one of the most, I think in Times Magazine, one of the most influential 10 people of the last century, Srila Prabhupada. And that's in the sense that it's an understatement, because if you think about how people influence you, like scientists will influence you, the scientific theories, or there'll be artists and musicians and so on, but Srila Prabhupada's influenced every part of our being, you know, both material and spiritually. Srila Prabhupada's taught us how to act as human beings, how to keep clean, how to eat, and most importantly, he's taught us the most intimate spiritual philosophy of the soul, and that re-establish our lost love for Krishna, and giving us the process and the facilities. So in that sense, he's the most influential people because he influences our whole being. He even taught us how to go to the toilet and have a shower, and just the things that we do now are all influenced by Prabhupada. You know, wash your hands before you eat, and even simple things like that, you know, how to sit and how to regulate your life, how long is ideally the right time to sleep, and not too much and not too little, and introduced us to the Krishna Prasadam, a wonderful menu from the spiritual world that keeps us all going. So anyway, I've yapped on a lot, and I apologise again that I wasn't able to speak too much directly on the verse, as I just came for class and there was no one giving class. So if anyone wants to comment or ask a question, you've got 4 minutes. Yes, I'll give you a microphone, or we don't have one. Vishnujan will grab a microphone. We have no microphones for the benefit of people sitting outside. They like to sit in the cold. Eh? Rajman. So you all got to read this book eventually, but work your way through it. You've got to read CC a lot.
It's in relation to the Caritamrita.
Yes.
Does it speak about, because I never read it, does it talk about the original constitution of the soul? Because sometimes we read that the original constitution is within Goloka, right?
I haven't read that. The original constitution of the soul is Goloka Vrindavan. There's souls in Vaikuntha as well.
Sorry?
There's souls all over Vaikuntha.
Okay.
But it doesn't talk about that, no.
Okay.
It deals more with the process of chanting, because that's what we do, and how to perfect your chanting and how to reach the topmost.
But it does talk about the fact that the soul goes to Vaikuntha and then keeps progressing towards.
Not always, yeah, not always. In the case of Gokumara, yes, it shows a gradual process, but that's not the case of all souls, you know. The most living entities that take to Krishna consciousness and reach a perfect stage in this lifetime, it's explained in the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Prabhupada writes, quoting Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, that sadhaka, once he becomes perfect, is called a siddhi, and that siddhi is placed in the womb of a gopi, somewhere in some universe where Krishna is performing his pastimes. So Krishna, when he winds up his activities, he was here 5,000 years ago, finishes, winds up his pastime, then it starts all over again in another universe and another universe. It goes on eternally. So in this case, the perfected living devotee attains Bhoma Vrindavan. And the reason he sent to Bhoma Vrindavan is explained also by Prabhupada, our acharyas, is further training. Because when you enter a pastime, we're speaking very elevated subject matter, but I guess Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita is that you attain your Svarup, which is your eternal form when you go to Bhoma, but your siddhi is developed in that situation, your perfection. You learn to perfectly serve Krishna again through the association of those devotees we're talking about here that come with Krishna. So when you enter that lila, that pastime, you get direct association with Nitya devotees, eternal devotees, not conditioned devotees, and you're like the new kid on the block, and you, through their association, you get fully trained how to serve and love Krishna perfectly, and then you transfer at the end of that lifetime to Goloka, and then there's no training there. Your siddhi sarup is fully attained, your eternal spiritual form.
So basically, if I understand well, everyone has different siddhis for, right? Some people.
Yeah, we're all completely different. Yes, absolutely.
Some people can, maybe their form was in Vaikuntha.
Absolutely, yeah.
And there's no progression.
I would say there's an exception in this age with the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is able to elevate us to higher status. That's explained in Adi-lila. It can happen. Not normally you turn, but in this age, through the mercy of Sri Chaitanya, what he's giving here is more than we deserve, so that indicates also that it can be elevated. As stated, I've heard a very long seminar I attended in Mayapur by Bhakti Surya Swami explain this very point. So yes, he takes Lord Chaitanya takes our Vaidhi Bhakti, us struggling along with the rules and regulation, he transforms that into Raganuga Bhakti. How that happens, I can't explain. But we get more for our buck here in this age, you know. It's like we're super unqualified, you know. A magic pill. Last question.
Did Prophet say that?
Because anyway, there's a lot of prasad in there. Just speak loudly.
Did Prophet say that? Did Prophet say that Goloka Vrindavan is bigger than all of Vaikuntha planets put together, and that
Yes.
there's more of the entities in Goloka Vrindavan than all Vaikuntha planets?
Yes, I've read that. Yes, that's correct. Yeah, it's a principal planet. It's where the Supreme Original Person resides, and the majority of devotees are devotees of Krishna. It may seem like a minority in this world, but in the spiritual world, they're a majority. Okay, so again, thank you very much for your attention, and sorry I've gone a bit too long. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Sri Caitanya Caritamrita, Gaur Premanandi.